Welcome to London Property Digest, your essential 10-minute audio recap for staying informed on London's property market. We've been seeing some interesting shifts lately. Things are cooling down a bit after that pandemic frenzy, but that doesn't mean the market is crashing. In fact, this could be good news for some buyers.
What's fascinating here is that this cool down is actually a healthy correction. Remember those crazy low interest rates and stamp duty holidays? Well, those were temporary boosts, and now we're seeing a return to a more sustainable pace.
Right, it's like letting some air out of an overinflated tire. But even with this slowdown, London is holding up pretty well compared to other areas in the UK. Zoopla reported a 16% jump in properties for sale here compared to last year. That suggests sellers are still confident in the market, right?
Exactly. And that confidence makes sense when you consider the sheer size and resilience of the London market. Zoopla also reported that the total value of London's housing market reached a whopping $537 billion in July 2024. That's a lot of zeros.
It's mind-boggling. Okay, so we have this cooling market, but London is still a powerhouse. What does that mean for someone who's thinking about buying or selling right now?
Well, for buyers, especially first-time buyers, this slowdown could be a chance to finally get a foot in the door. Prices are becoming more attainable, and while those higher interest rates are a challenge, they're not insurmountable.
But speaking of challenges, we've read that first-time buyers are really feeling the squeeze right now. High house prices, rising rents, and those interest rates are making it tough to break into the market.
Absolutely. It's a difficult landscape for them. They're stuck between rising rental costs and the need for a hefty deposit. It's like they're being pulled in two directions, but there are some glimmers of hope. Lenders are starting to offer more 95% mortgages again, which is a big help for those who don't have a huge chunk of cash saved up.
That's great news. So it sounds like this cooling period could create opportunities, particularly for first-time buyers. But what about sellers? What should they be aware of in this shifting market?
Realistic pricing is key in this market. It's tempting to hold out for those peak pandemic prices, but those days are gone. Overpricing a property can lead to price cuts down the line, and that can actually deter potential buyers.
That's like a trust issue.
Yeah.
Buyers want to feel confident that they're getting a fair deal, not being taken advantage of. Speaking of buyers,
Yeah,
we can't forget about the cash buyers. It seems they're in a very strong position right now.
absolutely. Cash buyers have a lot of leverage in this market. They're not tied to mortgage rates and can move quickly, which gives them a real edge in negotiations. For a seller eager to make a move, a cash offer might be hard to resist, even if it's slightly below the asking price.
So speed and certainty are valuable assets in this market. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now let's dive into some expert predictions. Lloyd's Banking Group, for example, has forecast a potential 8% drop in average London house prices next year. Should that scare people off?
It's certainly a bold prediction, but it's important to remember that forecasts are just that, predictions. What's more interesting is that Lloyd's also anticipates stabilization in 2025, so it's not all doom and gloom. This suggests that the current slowdown is a readjustment, not a free fall.
It's like the market is catching its breath after a sprint. And let's not forget that Rightmove actually adjusted its 2024 house price inflation forecast for London from max of 1% to plus 1%.
Exactly. They're seeing a more positive trajectory than initially anticipated, and there's also talk of potential Bank of England rate cuts in the future, which could further stimulate demand and stabilize the market.
So even with all this talk of cooling, we're not necessarily heading for a crash. It's more like a market recalibration, right?
Precisely. And that's good news for the long-term health of the London property market.
Speaking of recalibration, let's shift our focus to some of the more nuanced trends playing out in the London market. What are we seeing at the micro level?
Well, one thing that's really interesting is that those pandemic trends we talked about, like craving more space and fleeing to the countryside, seem to be reversing.
Really? So people are rediscovering the perks of city life.
Exactly. We're seeing an uptick in buyer inquiries for properties closer to major cities, according to Rightmove. People are realizing that maybe that country cottage isn't so practical when you factor in commutes, access to amenities, and that vibrant city buzz.
I can imagine. That peace and quiet starts to lose its appeal when you're spending 3 hours a day in traffic.
Right. And it's not just about commutes, it's about the lifestyle. Cities offer a certain energy, a cultural richness that's hard to replicate elsewhere. But of course, this shift in preferences is having a ripple effect on different types of properties and their prices.
Let's dive into those details.
Your thing.
So we were just talking about how those pandemic trends of fleeing the city seem to be reversing. What's happening with property types specifically?
We're seeing a resurgence in interest for 1- and 2-bedroom flats. particularly in commuter towns around major cities. These are places like Slough Watford or Huddersfield, areas that offer a balance of affordability and convenience.
It's like they're getting the best of both worlds, a taste of city life without the city center price tag.
What about those who stayed in the city? Any interesting trends there?
Yes, London still reigns supreme when it comes to average property price, hitting £536,500 in October 2024. However, in line with that national cooling trend, annual price falls in London have been more pronounced than in other parts of the UK.
It does seem counterintuitive that prices are falling even as demand for city living is increasing. What's the takeaway for our listeners who are trying to make sense of all of this?
Well, the key takeaway is that this is a market in transition. It's moving away from the frenzied pace of the past few years and finding a new equilibrium. While prices might be dipping, it's important to remember that London property has consistently demonstrated resilience over the long term. Right, it's not about timing the market perfectly, but rather understanding the fundamentals and aligning your decisions with your individual goals and circumstances. Now, before we move on, let's talk about flats versus houses. We know demand for city living is up, but is that impacting the demand for flats in London?
It appears flats are holding up reasonably well in terms of sales, possibly because their prices didn't climb as dramatically as houses during the pandemic frenzy. However, it's also worth noting that flat prices in London have continued to decline, even as the market for larger properties stabilizes.
So is it safe to say that a well-priced flat in a desirable area of London is still a pretty solid investment?
Location is always key, but in this market, realistic pricing is more important than ever. Sellers need to work with agents who understand current conditions and price their properties competitively to attract buyers.
And what about those buyers? What should they be doing to navigate this shifting landscape?
I would say knowledge is power. Stay informed about market trends, understand the factors driving them, and don't let headlines dictate your decisions. There are always opportunities in the property market. It's just a matter of being prepared and informed.
Speaking of being informed, let's talk about a topic that often causes confusion and frustration for both buyers and sellers: the conveyancing process.
What's fascinating about conveyancing is that it's a process most people only go through a handful of times in their lives, yet it's a crucial part of buying and selling property.
Right, it's like this huge financial transaction.
Yeah.
But the system itself can be pretty clunky and opaque. There's a parliamentary inquiry looking into this process right now. Why is that? What are the issues they're trying to address?
They're trying to make the process more transparent, efficient, and consumer-friendly. They're examining everything from the time it takes to complete a transaction to the quality of information provided to buyers and sellers. They're also looking at things like the regulation of estate agents and the transparency of conveyancing fees.
So it's about holding everyone accountable and making sure the system works for the people it's supposed to serve.
Exactly. And it's long overdue. The property market impacts so many lives. It's essential that the process itself is fair, efficient, and transparent.
Transparency is definitely key. Now, let's shift gears and talk about a segment of the market that's been incredibly volatile lately: rentals.
The rental market has been absolutely bonkers. We've seen record high rents, intense competition for properties, and even bidding wars in some areas.
Because like the frenzy of the sales market has spilled over into rentals.
Absolutely. And there are a few factors driving this. One is the simple fact that demand is outstripping supply. We have more people looking for rental properties than there are available units.
Right. And that's partly because some people who might have bought a property a few years ago are now choosing to rent instead, because of rising mortgage rates, affordability concerns, or just a desire for flexibility.
Exactly. They're adding to the already high demand in the rental market. And then you have landlords who are selling up, maybe because of regulatory changes, tax implications, or just to cash in on high property prices.
So fewer landlords and more tenants equals a very competitive rental landscape. What does this mean for someone looking to rent in London right now?
Be prepared for a challenging search. You might need to compromise on certain preferences, be ready to act quickly, and be prepared to pay a premium for the right property. However, this increased demand also highlights London's enduring appeal as a place to live and work.
Great point. Even with these challenges, London's rental market reflects its continued desirability and dynamism.
Absolutely.
It's amazing to think about how all these threads, shifting demographics, remote work, sustainability, are weaving together to reshape London's property landscape.
What's fascinating is that these trends aren't just impacting specific neighborhoods or property types. They're fundamentally changing what people value in a home. It's less about owning a large property and more about having a space that aligns with your lifestyle values and aspirations.
So it's about finding a home that's an extension of yourself, a place that reflects your priorities and supports your well-being.
Exactly. And this shift in mindset is leading to some exciting innovations in the property market. We're seeing developers prioritize things like natural light, biophilic design, and communal spaces that foster a sense of community and belonging.
It's like they're creating environments that nurture both individual and collective well-being.
Precisely. And this focus on well-being is also driving a demand for properties with access to green spaces, fitness facilities, and even co-working spaces.
So it's not just about the four walls of your home anymore. It's about the ecosystem that surrounds it.
Exactly. And this holistic approach to property is also reflected in the growing emphasis on sustainability. People want homes that are energy efficient, use sustainable materials, and minimize their environmental impact.
It's like sustainability is becoming a non-negotiable, a fundamental requirement for any property that aspires to be truly desirable.
Absolutely. And this demand for sustainable living is driving a wave of innovation in the property sector, from the use of smart technologies to the integration of renewable energy
So
sources.
it's not just about doing good for the planet. It's also about creating homes that are healthier, more comfortable, and more cost-effective to live in.
Precisely. And this convergence of well-being and sustainability is creating a new paradigm for property development, one that prioritizes both human and planetary health.
So as we look to the future of the London property market, it's clear that these trends are going to continue to shape the way we live, work, and interact with our built environment.
And while there will always be market fluctuations and unforeseen challenges, these underlying shifts towards well-being, sustainability, and a more holistic approach to property suggest a positive trajectory for the London market.
It's an exciting time to be a part of this evolving landscape, witnessing firsthand how the property market is responding to the changing needs and aspirations of Londoners.
And for those looking to navigate this dynamic market, the key is to stay informed, stay curious, and embrace the opportunities that emerge from this ongoing transformation.
Well said. So whether you're a seasoned investor, a first-time buyer, or simply a curious observer, remember that knowledge is your most valuable asset in this ever-evolving market.
And of course, don't forget to,
Subscribe to London Property Digest for the latest updates on the London property market.
until next time.